Hi, my name is Newell Davis with World Composting, and today we're going to focus on people that are maybe starting out with this hobby of vermicomposting or composting with worms. I know that I have a lot of videos that show how my bins are doing, or my urban worm bag or vermibags are doing, but today I want to talk about starting, and really starting simple, and that is starting with a bin. And I show a lot of bins on my videos. My new ones now are these busboy tubs, which I've got one right in front of me right here. These are the ones that I use the most probably now. But there's a lot of different bins you can choose from. And I want to show you some of those options. I want to show you some of the advantages and disadvantages to them. There's two bins that I run primarily in my basement. That's the busboy tub and then the 10-gallon totes. But I also have a couple of mortar trays, medium-sized mortar trays that I run. And then I had one that was a 27-gallon tote that I was running for a while that I emptied out this week. And then I have another one that's an 18-gallon tote. So I've tried a couple different sizes and a couple different things. I want to show you the advantages and disadvantages to each of these and kind of let you make your own decision. A lot of it also is based on price, which I think you should always look at when you're starting a system like this. Price does matter, but sometimes there's some advantages to certain things and disadvantages to others. So with that, let's take a look at these and see which one you might think would work for you. All right, hopefully this isn't too wobbly because I got the camera up pretty high, but these are the three bins that I use here. So this first one here that we're going to focus on in the middle is the mortar tray, and I just want to show you here size-wise. It's much larger than these other systems. I mean, it's a good amount larger, and that can be an issue. It's a little bit harder to store, and it's a little bit harder to put places. The other thing I want to point out is that, as you can see, this edge comes right over this lip here. It's not nearly as high as the other ones. Now, with that, I do want to say that this, I know a lot of people do use these. I think that they can work just fine. They're just not really useful for my purposes. They're a little bit too long, too wide, and they're not quite deep enough. I wish they were just a little bit deeper at times. If you are running, though, worms where you're trying to breed them up by actually putting in dry bedding material, I think that this is a great system because you can quickly remove these covers. These are working worm bins, by the way, and you can just air out the system very quickly. It's a lot of surface area to let that moisture out and let heat out if necessary. But for me, this is not my favorite system. I then have over on this side, I've got my 10-gallon totes. These are actually my favorite. I'm going to be honest with you. Again, showing it here, it's a little bit smaller. Quite a bit smaller actually, but it has a lot more depth. I mean, this is actually on a lower shelf and it's still above this system by a couple inches. Now I do punch holes in the sides here. I don't know if I can show that without moving all this stuff out of the way, actually, which I can do. Oh, maybe later. But I do punch holes in the sides here. This is actually a working bin as well, which is why I don't want to tilt it up too much, but I punch holes in these sides for air. This way you have a nice cover on top, and that's going to make sure that the moisture can kind of rebound and flow down in to keep these things more moist. But at the same time, if you need more airflow, you just take off the cover, you put it off to the side, and boom, you've got more airflow in here. And you know, you can dry it out if necessary. This one's ready for harvest or really close. So, but those are these are the bins that I primarily use, are my 10-gallon totes and these busboy bins. And this one is really off to the side. I'm going to just move this out of the way here for a minute. And that way we can kind of compare the two that I do use side by side. So as you can see, they are very similar in size. Now, these are just a tiny bit wider, these 10-gallon totes, than these right here. These are also just a little bit taller, again about that inch taller maybe. But these also don't have a lid, and these are a good portion cheaper. I do have links to some. I can't find this roughneck version anymore. They only have the brute version of these, and these are about, I want to say the brute version is like $20 a piece, which is kind of expensive. These were $8 when I bought them, and you know, for that I thought this was a good price to get started. I didn't mind if I messed up the bin. You know, $8 to lose is one thing. If you're losing 20, that could be a little bit more iffy if you're not, you know, familiar with the hobby and you lose your worms and you just put it off to the side and never do it again. But I do like these. These busboy bins, this is what I've really changed to in the past, and that's partially there's a couple reasons for that. One of the big ones is I can control air just as well, even though there's no lids. All I do is I just move this material on and off. As you can see, it's pretty wet in here. But I keep these on here, this bubble wrap on here. It allows air to get underneath and it can escape because there's these air gaps. It seems to work really well. I've actually had good success with these, but they are a little bit smaller. I do wish that they were like a little bit longer, maybe, another, 2 inches longer or so. But they do hold a good amount of material. They don't have lids, but they also don't stick out quite as far. So these lids stick out, and it can be kind of hard with having those over the edge even further. So they bump up against things. They can be propped up, whereas this is more internal into the system, which is kind of nice as well. So, overall, this is still my favorite. Or I'm sorry, this is my second favorite. These are my favorites, these 10-gallon totes. But these work really well, and I do recommend them. I think it's for 2 of them is $13, so they're pretty inexpensive, at least at Sam's Club online. They're a little bit more. I do have some links down below, but I do really like these systems. Both of these work really well. Now, I want to talk about going larger than this. So if you're going larger than these systems as far as these totes, they do have ones that are larger. I have an 18-gallon, and then I also have a, not Rubbermaid, but I do have a 27-gallon one. And I'll show you those maybe while I'm talking, but the biggest problem I had with those is movement. These things get very, very heavy. Like this one is pretty full, and it probably weighs a good 30 to 40 pounds. And that's a lot of weight to move around. It gets kind of hard to dump it out or move it off a shelf. And when you start getting bigger than this, you can get to ones that you cannot move anymore. So my 27-gallon, I physically could not move it. I couldn't pick it up. I had it up on a shelf. I had to work over top my head to dig down into the stuff to get it, and it was not a fun experience to use it, which is why I switched to these smaller bins. So, it's one of those things where those 27-gallon ones do work, but it could be a bigger effort in the end game of it. When you get to that end, and all of a sudden you've got 100 or 200 pounds of material in there, it's completely bent the bin out of shape. There's a chance of it cracking from weight, which can happen with water, which is why a lot of times when you're doing aquaponics or hydroponics in these, you actually will kind of seal these sides together. So I do think the smaller bins are a little bit better unless you have to have a larger bin. I do have my 55-gallon tote. It does bow outward. That's where I store all my castings essentially. But, if it breaks, oh well, I can get another one. But I'm hoping that doesn't happen. But it is definitely a lot of pressure. And I never really, it's usually a little bit more dry than this material is because I kind of dry it out before I sort it. So the last system I want to talk about is an 18-gallon system. So this is one. And when you do get to these larger systems, you do need drainage holes. These do not need drainage holes on the bottom. These are single tubs. This same thing right here. And again, with the other one as well, those are single systems. It's one container. When you get larger than this, you need 2, or I should say deeper. If you go really deep, you need 2 systems so you can drain out the water out of the bottom. And that's what I've done on these larger systems as well, is I have drainage. And then I have an 18-gallon tote that's nested in one of these 10-gallon totes, and that way it can drain everything down. And I've shown a video on that before on how I created it, and I'll link it up top. But the thing is that you need to make a determination before you get your worms how large you want to go. And I always suggest also going small with only a pound of worms at the beginning. You don't want to dump in 5 pounds, have them all run out of the bin and die. You really want to start small with these. You want to start with a pound, you want to build up your knowledge, build up your worms, and then you can slowly add more and more food, and eventually you'll have 3 or 4 pounds possibly in a system. Or, a couple systems with 3 or 4 pounds. You don't want to start out too large and lose your worms. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope this was educational for those that are maybe new to this and are looking to get into the hobby. But if you have questions, please leave them down below, and I will try to get back to you as fast as I can. And hopefully, if you have more questions, I also have more content out there, such as adding grit, such as eggshells or crushed up crab, and, some of the other systems that I have, from my vermi bag to the urban worm bag to even a trash can that I converted into one. So if you have questions, leave them down below. And of course, always look for more knowledge if you want to get into this hobby. It's always a pleasure to have more knowledge than not enough and fail, because it could be a waste of money if you don't do it right and all your worms run out. So thank you for watching.